My name is Owen Wagner, and this video is being produced for as part of the requirements for NC State's MAE 535 course. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I constructed my Faraday shaking flashlight and discuss some of the components and principles underlying that light. So I turned the lights in my kitchen off for effect to just show you the light that's produced by the flashlight, but turning them back on now to facilitate discussion. So just beginning with the assembly of the flashlight, what we've got here, at the heart of this thing is this gray piece of electrical conduit. It's 3/4 inch thick, cut to a 10-inch length. And inside of that is a stack of 12 neodymium magnets. And those magnets have a pole that's oriented axially, and that's something that's very important to keep in mind when you're purchasing your magnets. The original set that I purchased had poles oriented in this direction, and that ended up producing very little current, something like less than 0.2 volts per cycle, whereas a good shake under with this stack of magnets in this coil arrangement was producing upwards of 4.5 volts per cycle. So what I then did was fix these two rubber caps at the end. They obviously keep the magnet in place, but because they're rubber, they also dampen the blow of the magnet hitting the ends. These magnets are brittle, so it's important to lessen that blow as much as possible. So before we look under the hood in this Tupperware container at some of the circuitry upstream from the inductor, I'll just show you how this stuff looks in a formal electronic schematic. What you've got there in the upper left-hand corner is the neodymium magnets passing through a coil. Then that AC goes to a full bridge rectifier, which consists of 4 diodes. And what those diodes do is they basically direct the electrons and anti-electrons, if you will, in the proper direction. So you've got the electrons going this way. So once that rectifier's been in place, you're then producing direct or DC current, which is suitable to be fed into a capacitor. And what we've done here is link the positive side of this rectifier to the positive end of the capacitor, which allows us to store some of this energy, which makes this tool a little bit more practical. It means we don't have to be shaking it constantly in order to get light. And we've then hooked that up to a switch, the positive sides of the rectifier and capacitor linked up to a switch, which then feeds into the positive side of the LED. We then soldered all of these negative terminals back together to complete the circuit. So let's just go under the light here, and I'll show you how this stuff looks in the Tupperware container. Bear with me for a second. So probably makes sense to begin with the rectifier. Down there in the bottom corner, you can see the 4 prongs coming out of that. The 2 enamel coated copper wires are going to feed into the squiggly lines or the AC components of that rectifier. Leading out of the positive terminal of that rectifier is going to be a wire feeding both the switch, this toggle switch, which is here, this red box, as well as the capacitor, which is glued to the top of this Tupperware. And then the negative side of that rectifier is going to be linked up to the negative side of the capacitor, and then as well as the negative side of that toggle switch there. So while this thing produces some light, and I may even keep it around for a while, so my kids can play with it. Obviously, the primary purpose of this was to sort of as a learning tool. And what we've really done here is you know, in addition to producing a little bit of light, is also demonstrate Faraday's law, which basically says that that the amount of current induced is equal to the change in the flux linkage relative to time. And the way that I went about trying to maximize that V induced is by incorporating as many turns of this coil as possible, as using as many magnets as practical, you know, given the given sort of the cost and the ergonomic considerations that one has to keep in mind with something like this. And then finally, you obviously want to shake this thing as rapidly as possible in order to produce a stronger current. A few things to sort of keep in mind, I guess, when you're building one of these things. I mentioned the magnets. Obviously, polarity of the magnets is very important. They're not going to work if the polarity is oriented in this direction. It's got to be oriented north-south or axially to the coil. Also, supercapacitors. I used a 0.33 farad supercap, 5.5 volts. Probably should have opted for something a little bit smaller because it took ages to charge it initially, although subsequent recharges weren't too bad. Also, capacitors, for those of you who don't work with them, are a little bit finicky. They're kind of like gremlins. If you don't treat them right, they can turn on you pretty quick. After waiting a week for one of my capacitors from Jameco, I promptly ruined it by hooking it up to a 9-volt battery in order to charge it quickly and test my circuit. It was only a 5.5 volt capacitor. So yeah, just be careful with those capacitors. And then finally, I think my total cost of materials for this thing was somewhere between 15 and 20 bucks. Most of that cost was associated with the magnets, but you know, one, I guess, sobering thing about all of this is if you go and look online, you can buy a pretty high quality shaking flashlight for less than 10 bucks. So that's my video. Thanks for watching.